Locked on NFL on a Friday, and we're going to ask this question. Who had the most complete offseason, draft, and free agency? I'll tell you why it's the Bears in just a second here on Locked on NFL.
You are Locked On NFL, your daily NFL podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
It is your team every day. We thank you for making us your first listen. Locked on NFL. I am Tony Wiggins. He is Lauren Cox, and we're going to bring you the Locked on NFL show here on a Friday. But we're going to first tell you that we're free to subscribe to on our YouTube page. That is Locked on NFL. Make sure you head over there, hit the like button, hit the subscribe and the bell so that you get notifications each and every time we drop an episode. And then wherever you listen to your audio podcast, if you're at work with the ear pods on, or if you're driving in a car, make sure that whatever entity you listen to a podcast, you check in and make sure you don't miss an episode of Locked On NFL. Today's episode is brought to you by Monopoly Go. I admit I have a competitive side. Sometimes it gets pretty ugly. And I am a big fan of Monopoly Go, the mobile hit twist on classic Monopoly. So join your friends and download Monopoly Go now, free on the App Store or Google Play. And we would like to shout out to the everydayers that join Locked On NFL every single day. As I said before, I'm Tony Wiggins. He is Lauren Cox, my brother. What's going on?
Nothing much, man. Enjoying a little bit of a slowdown after the NFL draft, but it's finally time that we can quit sort of projecting what all these players are, where they're going to go, and now really sink into where they are and how that's going to affect this upcoming season.
That's the fun part of this. We do so much guessing and I mean months and months of guesswork. One of the things that I said on the local show that I host, Locked On Jaguars, is I said, well, now you know what everyone was thinking. Like those 3 or 4 months when we thought they were thinking this one thing, we know exactly what they were thinking that whole time because we see exactly what they did and what happened. So what we're going to talk about today is we're going to end the show talking about AFC East quarterback rankings. Now, this is going to be a little bit more difficult than people think because it's going to be based on our projection of how much success they're going to have this year. It's not a ranking of where they are in the minds of people as far as their talent level. It's where they're going to be ranked at the end of the year based on what we project. Before that, we're going to talk about vet free agents that can really, really help teams. Lauren and I have really peeked out a couple of teams that can really, really help contenders get over the hump. And what I mean by over the hump, you think about a team that needs to get off of the field in the NFC Championship or AFC Championship game, who can help them make a play. We saw Detroit just need somebody to make one last year at several different chances, and they failed at it. And that's a bad place for teams to be. You want to find out if there's somebody that can help you make one play, and we're going to talk about them. But first, we're going to start out with who had the most complete off season in the NFL. And I had to full disclosure, I had to tell Lauren who I was picking because it's the team that he actually covers in Chicago. So I'll start with the Chicago Bears. I think they had not a complete, but the most complete, because I think if you ask any general manager around the league, they never get everything that they want. They can't do everything in 1 year.
I do think there is a team that got pretty close to everything they want. But for the Bears, they definitely addressed everything in some way, but not like enough that I would have wanted. Like, yes, of course, you can't get receivers and a quarterback and a running back and a defensive line and a safety. I mean, you can't do everything all at once. But the Bears are still sitting here with a decent amount of salary cap space to go out and sign probably another defensive lineman at some point in the coming days and weeks after they go through rookie minicamp to address that position a little bit more than they have, because they lost a couple players there and haven't done a ton to address it. A 5th-round pick on Austin Booker from out of Kansas doesn't feel like enough for me on that pass rush. And I'm not in love with what they did at the center position either. Like, I really wanted as sure of an offensive line for Caleb Williams, and they're a young group that's going to get better, but they traded a 5th-round pick for a guy, Ryan Bates, out of the Bills, and signed the Rams center Coleman Shelton, and they're kind of in a competition there. But I really wanted like a solid starting center, and it feels like the Bears had the cap space to at least like pay for a middle of the line center. Those don't cost an arm and a leg. The pass rusher thing, I can understand. You can't always get everything you want there. It's an expensive position, a premium spot that everybody wants good players. But a lot of Bears fans still feel like they need one more offseason before they're like really everywhere they want to be.
And I can agree with that. Generally, teams when I thought about this, I was pondering a certain team that's obvious because they're very, very good, right? There's not a whole bunch of blue sky for them to do a whole bunch of stuff in the offseason because their team is what it is. And all of their core players, key quarterbacks, pass rushers, defensive line, I mean, they got Hall of Famers, you know what I'm saying, that are still playing at a very high level. I'm talking about like the Chiefs. So there's not a whole lot they have to do for you to term or call their offseason successful. The Bears, on the other hand, had a whole lot of stuff they needed to do. They needed a new face of the franchise. They needed a quarterback. They needed to get the quarterback that they used to have weapons. And so now they really have to weaponize this guy. And I know the guy that left, Justin Fields, probably like saying, hey, where are my two receivers? Where are my ball catchers to help out and take some of the pressure off of DJ Moore? So I really, really do get it. It's not even more so on the field that I think they really helped themselves. I think they helped themselves off the field a whole bunch. Because like 2 years ago, a lot of people thought the Bears were like the least talented team that they've seen, even with the new addition of Fields and Moore. Folks are just like, it's not enough. So what they did was they said, okay, we got this quarterback. We're going to get a pure route runner in Keenan Allen. And then we're still going to use another top 10 pick on one of these big three, and we got Rome Odunze. I just really do believe his strengths is the fact that he can just flat out throw the ball. He's going to make some mistakes. He's going to do some things that's going to drive y'all crazy up there. But his strengths are he can just flat out throw the ball. The best thing to do is find them people that can get open really, really quick. And that's exactly what I think they've accomplished. At the worst thing is they don't improve defensively. The worst thing that they have done is they're going to have the ability to get into some shootouts with people and be able to go up. It's not necessarily monsters of the midway anymore. And that's the most beautiful thing to me is I just think that they really like Justin Fields, but now they have a guy that they feel like is a Rolls Royce at quarterback. And they're going to be able to compete with these teams that go up and down the field. And it's just going to be a new day in Chicago. So a little bit of the off the field stuff kind of makes me believe, because with Justin Fields, I think people wanted them to continue to play like the old Bears. Well, Jim McMahon wasn't a great passer. You know what I mean? So you're going to have that dude that can matriculate the ball down the field. And I think it's a new day for Chicago.
See, definitely a great offseason in Chicago, but a couple of teams I want to throw out as counter arguments. One is the Houston Texans. They were a team that probably did more total than anybody else in terms of somehow they found ways to obviously trade for Stephon Diggs. They ended up trading for Joe Mixon. They added a bunch of key players on free agency in terms of like Danielle Hunter on the defensive line. No first round pick because of trading up for Will Anderson last year, but still added a couple key pieces in that secondary, offensive lineman or two in the draft as well. Like it felt like they filled a lot of holes in a way that felt good. But at the same time, I'm always a little bit skeptical of the team that makes a bunch of changes and expects all these new pieces to all fit in together right away. So I look instead at a team like Green Bay. I mean, as much as it pains me to say it, like it's not about doing everything or doing too much, but it's like just the right amount, right? They signed Josh Jacobs in free agency. They completely overhaul their safety position. That was their big weakness. New defensive coordinator in there to help improve the scheme there. They get a new offensive tackle to replace David Bakhtiari there in the first round. They get another back in the backfield to replace Josh Jacobs and help kind of restock that position, plus all the other young players. They redid their linebacker spot with a couple of picks. Like, just felt to me like they were able to plug in everything kind of where they wanted to and got pretty good value along the way without overspending or getting over aggressive in any of the areas.
You know what's interesting that you said about Green Bay? They're another one of those teams that because of the deep run they made, it's not like they had a whole bunch of things that they needed to do, right? But the things that they did need to do outside of the tackle, but they were in a real good spot in the draft to get that. Everything else is like not at a premium position. And that's a good point. Like you were talking about safety and off the ball linebacker. They could add players at those positions because one, they were picking right where those guys were supposed to come off the board from a positional value standpoint. But then the other part of it is this, and this is what's really, it's because everything else is full, because they got all of those young receivers, right? Because they got a quarterback that they believe in, and they have defensive linemen that they have as core guys and their corners. So needing non-premium position and being in a non-premium spot where you have to acquire them, it's perfect. It's perfect for Green Bay, and that's a very, very good point. Even though I know it was hard for you to make that when you're talking about the Packers. All right, vet free agents. There's a bunch of them out there. Lauren even hinted at some defensive linemen that could help some of these teams get over the hump. We have two in mind, two of them that I actually covered before. We're going to tell you why. It's Yannick Ngakoue and Calais Campbell. We're going to talk about that in just a second here on Locked On NFL. First, I'm going to let you know about FanDuel, today's sponsor for today's show. FanDuel is the truth, man. These games are going on right now as we speak. These playoff games with the NBA, no more load management. If a guy is healthy, he's going to play, so you don't have to worry about that. And then in the NHL, where it pretty much seems like all the time the favorite wins. But you can read up all of that at FanDuel and get all of that information before you make your wagers. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 to bet on spreads, money lines, player props, and more. Visit FanDuel.com/locked on and make every playoff shot count. I'll say it again. It's FanDuel.com/locked on and make every playoff shot count. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. All right. So we are right back here on Locked On NFL on this beautiful, beautiful Friday. Lauren Cox and me, Tony Wiggins. By the way, my man David Harrison is feeling a little under the weather, so he'll be back hopefully next week. I know we do a little bit of moving around, but we can tag team real easily here on Locked On NFL and the Locked On Podcast Network. All right, so Lauren and I were talking about most complete off seasons. Doesn't mean the offseason is complete. It's just the most complete when relatively talking about the other teams, right? And there are some teams that may still have some needs because you can't fix them all in one offseason. Now, who can really make some additions? Well, with whom can some teams make some additions that are really going to be able to elevate them? I think this has to come at positions where you see stuff, right? Like there are no guards or left tackles or right tackles walking around on the streets right now that can really, really help a team. So it has to be at a position where you can actually see the results, where it's tangible, right? And one of the places that you actually see a lot of stuff when everybody's watching is third down. Third down can be affected by pass rushers. I think Yannick Ngakoue, for that reason, and all of his shortcomings that people say that he has when it's time to stop the run, has been top 10 in disrupting quarterbacks with pressures, fumbles, forced fumbles, and sacks since he has been in the National Football League. And people like that do not go unnoticed by teams that think they can make a run in the playoffs.
Yeah, pass rush is such a premium, and to be able to get a veteran like that at this stage makes a huge difference. I'm just not sure with Ngakoue what his value is going to be at this point, because he was so consistently not necessarily like always a 10-sack guy, but like a minimum 8-sack guy every year. You look the past like 4 or 5 seasons of his career prior to 2023, he had 9.5 sacks, 10 sacks, 8 sacks, 8 sacks, 9.5 sacks, 12 sacks, 8 sacks. This last year in Chicago, worst year of his career in terms of production, 4 sacks across 13 games, ended the season injured. And albeit the first half of that season was without Montez Sweat, prior to the Sweat trade in Chicago. So he really didn't have much else on that defensive line and got a lot of double teams and triple teams and a lot of the attention there. But there was certainly a feeling in Chicago like 2023 was a real disappointment for Ngakoue. He was this mercenary free agent edge rusher signing, kind of like what Jadeveon Clowney does now, where he kind of takes his time and then signs with the team to be that big time pass rusher, and got like $10 million last year on a 1-year deal from the Bears. So like, all right, you're going to come in and you're going to be this pass rush. And it really, we never really saw Ngakoue, take over and make those kind of like maybe one, like the 4 sacks he had, maybe 1 or 2 of those was like a big third down play, but it wasn't like the kind of consistent pressure generation that the Bears really needed from him. And so now we're left thinking like, okay, he's a free agent again, lingering through the offseason. The Bears aren't going to pay him $10 million a year to come back again, but like, is another team willing to do that? Or is he going to have to take, more like a $4 or $5 million deal? Or a team's going to say, oh, you know what? He was on a bad Bears defensive line last season and then he was hurt. So that's not really what, like, Ngakoue is still only 28, 29 years old. He just turned 29 in March. So like, he's not old, by any means. So he should be able to get back to being as good as he was earlier on any defensive line that has like real NFL talent.
Yeah. So my question to you, watching all of those Bears games, was it one of those games? Did they have a lot of those games early where I don't care if they had Bruce Smith, he wasn't getting back because the teams schematically may have been ahead, therefore they were running the ball and running the clock. I'm just asking because a lot of times guys will tell you using those stats, and those stats aren't telling you the whole story.
Sure. Yeah, there was some aspect of that, but I think at the same time, like, the Bears did a good job of, not trying to overwork Ngakoue. I mean, he's not the best in the running game anyway, so like they prioritized him more on passing downs when they had him. That the Bears definitely got behind, but it wasn't like I think it wasn't purely a lack of pass rushing opportunities. I think generally, his pressures were down, his missed tackles overall were up. There was just not quite enough of those big splash plays, despite having a pretty significant at least share of pass rushing plays. Like last year, he rushed the passer 400 times and was on the field for about 150 running plays. So like it was mostly be there to get after the quarterback, and we'll put someone else in on more of the key running downs and not ask you to be all that. And there was also times when it's the third quarter and you're down 21, so he's not going to get a lot of opportunities there. But there were enough of those times where it's like somebody's got to step up here, and no one was. And Ngakoue was there and wasn't one of them. It's not purely his fault, but you were hoping for a little bit better from him based on the investment.
Tell me about Calais. What you think he still has to offer at this point in his career?
Yeah, obviously a different part of his career as what is he now, 37, turns 38 during the season. But like what stands out to Calais to me is last year he was on the field for 712 snaps, played all 17 games. He was just a couple snaps behind Bud Dupree for the most on that Falcons defensive line. Like this is not your 39-year-old edge rusher who limps in and plays a couple of pass rushing snaps. Only plays third downs because you got to keep him fresh. Like honestly, like I would start doing that with him just because I'd rather keep him fresh. I don't want to have to ask a 38-year-old to play 700 snaps. But the fact that he's still capable and still playing at a high level. I mean, 6.5 sacks last year, 5.5 the year before that in Baltimore. Like he is still a monster who gets after the quarterback, gets pressures, gets hurries, can still be a beast in the running game as well. Just big, strong, certainly not as explosive as he was in his younger days, but just so smart. Like he's just he can beat you with his brain almost before the snap and before you really physically engage. He already has a plan. He already knows where he's going, and he knows what to beat you with and how to have a counter move to what he is going to be able to beat you with. Like to me, as long as the body keeps holding up, which it certainly has consistently over the last few seasons, he's going to be valuable for some team, but he's also going to be one of these guys that he doesn't want to go to OTAs. Like he doesn't want to go to
no.
He doesn't really want to even go to training camp. So I don't think he's going to sign with the team until August, maybe. But wherever he ends up, I think they're going to get another solid contributor.
And you're gonna you ain't giving him league minimum. He ain't doing that either. He's if I got to get up and drive up here every morning, you know how old people think, man. If I got to get up and drive up here in the morning and deal with these young whippersnappers, y'all gonna have to pay me a little bit in order to babysit, because I think his role will be a little bit of that too. All right, so here's what we got. We're talking about pass rushers. Now we're going to talk about people that don't like to talk about pass rushers. We're going to talk about quarterbacks in the AFC East. Because I'm going to ask this question every week. I'm going to look at all the quarterbacks, and I'm going to start with them, because when you look I used to look at the newspaper, and the AFC East was always first, right? It was different teams back then. But we're going to talk about the AFC East, and we're going to talk about who and which quarterbacks at the end of the year, we're going to rank them. It's going to be based on the type of success that we think they can or can't have. We'll make sure we get to that. But before you get to that, if you're watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day, you got to turn down the volume with all that shouting and screaming. In fact, I mute mine and I still hear them screaming because they scream that loud sometimes. Well, guess what? Make the switch to Locked On Sports Today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel program for your everyday to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't miss analysis, opinions, and streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We're going to dissect the AFC East quarterbacks, and I'm going to tell you why Josh Allen ain't getting the love from me that some people think he probably deserves. And I'll get to it in just a second here with Lauren on Locked On NFL on a Friday. Got a new game for you. Monopoly Go. See, y'all thought I was just going to say Monopoly. Monopoly is tried and true, man. Everybody loves Monopoly. Got a little twist on it, though. Heightens your competitiveness and your edge. gives you a little bit of things to build teams on. It's called Monopoly Go, and it's been downloaded by millions and millions of people. All right. If you're really, really competitive and you like multitasking, this is the game for you because you can team up with friends for time tournaments where you work together to build up each other's boards. The more you win together, the more awesome prizes you actually unlock. And there's so much to get. Hilarious emojis for taunting friends when you smash their buildings or heist their vaults. Oh boy, this sounds like a lot of fun for me and my family. There's always something fun to discover in Monopoly Go. So get off the bench and go download it now, free on Google Play or the App Store. Game on. It's Monopoly Go, a new twist on one of your favorites of all time, Monopoly Go, and download Monopoly Go. All right, third and final segment here on Locked On NFL. You got Tony Wiggins and Lauren Cox. All right, Lauren, AFC East. By the end of the year, where are you going to rank these quarterbacks based on what you predict or project their season to be like?
It's really easy if you don't cover the AFC East or you don't live anywhere near the East Coast or any of these East Coast teams. It's easy to forget that Tua Tagovailoa led the NFL in passing yards last season. Like that's a stat that like I remember hearing, but like if you had asked me before, like off the top of my head, who was the NFL's leading passer last season, I don't think he would have been in my first few guesses. I wouldn't have guessed that Jared Goff was second either, but that's beside the point. Like that Dolphins offense like was incredible. And when you have Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle back, and then they added, I really like Malik Washington in the NFL draft. I don't know how big of an impact he's going to have, but you know, with Berrios in that offense too, like they've got weapons there still, and Tua can stay healthy. Like he's going to be in the mix to be the leading passer in the NFL again. And certainly you already talked about Josh Allen losing Stephon Diggs and not having a real true number one receiver there. As much as I like Keon Coleman, I don't think he's going to step in and be a 1,300-yard guy like Stephon Diggs was, nor Curtis Samuel. So like, can those guys equate some of that production? Quite a bit of it, yeah. But is he going to be back at the top of the NFL? I don't think so. And then Aaron Rodgers, it's been a few years since he's thrown for 4,000 yards, and now coming off the Achilles injury, but they've got a good supporting cast there. So like I'm left saying until otherwise, when you've got Tyreek Hill and Tua Tagovailoa and Mike McDaniel together, when those guys are healthy, that's the best passing offense in the division. And from there, it's like the Josh Allen versus Aaron Rodgers debate is the most interesting to me. And I think we both agree that the Patriots are probably fourth there.
Yeah, they're fourth, and we're not even going to include Drake May because I don't think he's going to see the field very much this year, at least early on. And if he does play a little bit, it's not going to be a big enough sample size for us to really talk about him very much. Jacoby Brissett is a little bit better prepared for this situation, I think, than a lot of people. Do I expect him to have a Geno Smith sort of comeback or uprising? No, but I think he's going to play a lot better than people think. That being said, he'll still be at the bottom of this list by the end of the year because he's a stopgap to everything else. I'm going to put Josh Allen third. I do believe that they're going to have some growing pains this year. I think he'll be good for Keon Coleman and vice versa. I think Dalton Kincaid is the cold hard truth. I say we saw a lot of James Cook last year at the end of the year, but my point is they've changed a lot of stuff. They changed their center. They've lost Gabe Davis. They didn't just lose their one starting receiver. They lost everybody. So they really do have a lot of things that they have to start over doing. And I believe they're going to turn to their running game a little bit to ease up on Josh Allen. And I think their defensive efficiency or deficiencies is going to really make them be on the losing side of more games than is going to be really, really comfortable. I'm going with Tua next. I think Tua is going to have a good year, but I think there's a bugaboo that's going to keep jumping up at them. They're not physical. The Dolphins, in every game that they played against somebody that wanted to punch them in the face, they took the ball and went home. And in the NFL, if you ever get a label of not being physical, people going to make you see about it every single time you see him. Oh, he can't take that. So let's hit him in the stomach. And that's what happens in those big games against really, really good teams. I'm going Aaron Rodgers at number one. And the reason why is not even my bias and love for his whole career, because you're right. He hasn't been healthy in years. But I think they're going to realize that. They have a really, really good defense, and they got a heck of a young running back. And now that they've added a lot of size on the defensive line and some weapons for Aaron Rodgers, I think he's going to really, really pick his spots and pick his moments on when he's going to get down and start letting things fly. And I think they're going to use Breece Hall for everything that he's should be used for. And I'm going to rank Aaron Rodgers number 1, Tua number 2, Josh Allen 3, and Jacoby Brissett 4.
There's certainly a history of 40-year-old quarterbacks being the best in that division.
I know it, right?
There's something to be said there. No, I mean, I definitely find myself leaning Rodgers over Allen. I'm not ready to put Rodgers above Tua until I really see that offense actually come together. I think on paper it's there, but I want to see also, coaching in that regard, like how that offense is going to come together as well. And with the Broncos head coach, who's their offensive coordinator now, I can't think of his name, who was from Green Bay with Rodgers.
Oh yeah, you're talking about hell, I know him. He's right here in Jacksonville.
Right?
Hackett.
Yes.
Nathaniel.
I still need to see Nathaniel Hackett really operate an offense at the level that Mike McDaniel has been doing with Tua and with Tyreek. I'm with you that Garrett Wilson last season had 1,000 yards with Zach Wilson and whatever quarter. I mean, they had a bunch of different quarterbacks last season, and Garrett Wilson was still able to be 1,000-yard guy without Aaron Rodgers. And then you add Mike Williams, who it's been a couple of years since he's played a full season to be 1,000-yard guy, but he is a 1,000-yard caliber receiver. And plus, weapons, you said, I think all the pieces are there for the Jets to even be number 1 ahead of the Dolphins, but I still really want to see that before I can believe it. Whereas with the Bills, we've seen this story before, not with Josh Allen per se, but when you try and piece together a receiving core with a bunch of number 2s and number 3s and hope that one of them becomes a number 1, they never really do. Especially when they're already established players like this. It was one thing in Green Bay last year where it was a bunch of rookies and second-year players, and then you kind of saw Christian Watkins grow into that role. But in Buffalo, it's besides Keon Coleman, it's all guys that you kind of know what they are and aren't. And Curtis Samuel's not going to become DJ Moore all of a sudden. He's not going to become Stephon Diggs all of a sudden. He is who he is. And Khalil Shakir is kind of the same way. So I think Josh Allen's going to be 3rd there. And then I still go Jets 2 and Dolphins 1, but I definitely see what you're saying about MVP Rodgers with 2,000-yard caliber receivers and a great back in that backfield, offensive line upgrades. The Jets can definitely be dangerous. I need to see it before I can really trust it.
Yeah, we all do. We all need to see it because I was so ambitious last year and sat up on a Monday night and watched the dude after 3 or 4 plays lay on the ground. And I'm like, ooh, that must stink for Jet fans to do all of that just for all of that and have that happen. That has to be crazy, man. But I'll tell you what, the day after he got hurt, Locked On Sports Today was off the chain because it always is. That's right. And Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. And now it's also available on Amazon Fire TV in the free Fire TV channels app. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7 covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Find Locked On Sports Today now available on the free Fire TV channels app. This is fun always to talk to my brother Lauren. One of us should be somewhere. It's 5 o'clock somewhere sipping on something or smoking a little cigar or whatever. Right, there you go. Right there you go. Already got it covered. All right, so make sure you tap back in to Locked On NFL every single day, Monday through Friday, because it's your team every day. We thank you for making us your first listen. For Lauren and me, Tony, and my man David, who we hope feels better, we will see you next time here on Locked On NFL.